Coffee Time Wednesdays with the Prairie Farm Podcast.
Can't hit us with the jingle.
Do-do-do-do-do.
A lot of companies talk about conservation, but I want to tell you about a company that actually puts their money where their mouth is. birdhuntersupply.com is a great company. I know the owner, Joe. He's a great dude. We've had the privilege of working with him, and let's just say he really puts his money where his mouth is. A large percentage of his profits from Bird Hunter Supply go to a conservation organization of your choice at checkout. So your purchase actually puts money towards conservation, and it's not just a roundup. It's not just asking you to donate on top of your purchase. This is included with your purchase. This man is running his very own small business version of Pittman Robertson, except without all the government stuff. I'm a big fan of that. So whether you're buying hunting apparel, decoys, dog training gear, you are actually going to be giving back to conservation. That is my friend Joe at birdhuntersupply.com. We love that company. We love what they have going on. Oh, and they do a really great job with their website. Makes it very easy. birdhuntersupply.com. What is the best way to broadcast both large and small seeds evenly? So these questions are from people that understand that you want to get the seed on top of the ground, but it can be difficult to do it. So Judd, you're leaving here and planting.
I'm leaving here
and you're going to plant large fluffy seed and small seed evenly. Mm-hmm. How are you going to do that?
I'm going to use rice hulls.
Okay. All right.
I like rice hulls. I have planted a lot with oats.
You were supposed to say the Hoxie Native Cedar, Judd.
Oh, the Hoxie Native Cedar.
No.
I thought that goes without saying. We can get into that too. Riley made a great video about that the other day. You guys should check out. But so, yeah, Hoxie Native Cedar. And there's a lot of different fillers you can do in there. And if you're not using something as big as one of our cedars, if you're just using a hand cedar or maybe a tailgate cedar, something like that, what you're looking for is something that's fairly small, uniform, and inert, and has the ability to suspend that smaller seed within it if you're going to be bouncing around out there in the field, because those smaller seeds will stratify down to the bottom, and you'll get bands of that in your planting where those species are much heavier to the point where they could outcompete each other. So it's very important that you suspend all those different kinds of seeds so that you get even application throughout your planting. Otherwise, like I said, and with a broadcast seeder, with a spinner on the bottom, what can happen is it's going to throw those heavier seeds out toward the edge, and they're going to be much more represented and form stripes in your planting. One of the reasons
fluffy seeds will just go out a few feet and then they'll fall. They won't fling as far, so you'll have this.
It's like throwing a wiffle ball versus a baseball.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, wow.
Exactly.
Great,
and Carol hated that. He didn't like rows made by a drill, and he didn't like stripes made by a broadcast seeder. So that went into his calculations of how many prototypes did he make of those seeders?
Maybe 4.
Four's plenty, but he used them. He used them and made.
We still have the first one.
Well, I think one of the underrated keys to the Hoxie cedar is the constant agitation.
Yeah, that's big.
And if you can have that in a cedar, then that solves a lot of those problems.
And credit where credit's due. That was Truex, their design, the agitator in there, and so even their hand crank cedars have agitators in them. Now, here's one thing I would say about broadcasters that fling it from side to side, like you were saying. You can minimize that stripe effect if a lot of broadcasters have like windows that you can close. If you can get it really narrow, like a really narrow window where it's not flinging 10 feet to the left and 10 feet to the right, you can actually fix a lot of that stripe, but you'll literally double your planting time. Because you can't, and that's totally fine. If you have a couple acres, not the end of the world. If you have 50 acres,
you need one of our cedars.
You need a Hoxie Native Cedar. I'm not trying to be a butthead. I mean, there's Great Plains and there's Truax out there.
Failure rate on those is high. If you don't know how to set them just right.
Yes, we get a lot of calls. How do I set this? And what's difficult is they're almost always drills. So now you're talking about needing to make sure you don't plant it too deep, like we talked about earlier. And they have a lot of gizmos on them. Gizmos are awesome. I like gizmos on my iPhone. I like them on my cameras. I like them on the stuff that I'm doing to record equipment. I don't like it on native cedars because gizmos break and they cost a lot to fix.
Yeah, well, and you're taking away one of the few advantages there are in planting prairie. the simplicity of it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you're overcomplicating something that does not need to be complicated, right? So not only did you tick off Wonder Woman by standing her up on her first date, but now you're overthinking on how you're going to get her back. So
Are you okay?
Call
Everything
back.
okay at home?
I ended up by some miracle playing it well, and I way married up. But
Oh man.
Kent likes football, and he did outkick his coverage.
that's right. I did outkick my coverage.
Oh man. All right. Well, let's scurry on next. Number 9, Riley. What is the role of prescribed burning in a long-term prairie maintenance?
I think it's a tool in your toolbox. I planted 10 acres of prairie. I think it would have been 6 years ago now. I think I bought it from you guys. Pre my time here. And I actually did a year where I did a spring burn on half of it. So it's split by a waterway in the middle. So I burned half of it and I left the other half to go, because something I'd always been asked was, do we need to burn this every year? What do you do if you burn? And I noticed when I did a spring burn, now I think I burned it in April. I'd have to look. But I saw more forbs. Obviously, your grass came down just because there was less competition. I saw more expression in the forbs. Did better on the brome. And what it comes down to with fire, though, like I said, is it's a tool in your toolbox. There's lots of opinions over the life of the podcast of different experts telling you burn in the fall, burn in the spring, burn for this, burn for that. Mm-hmm. It's really an objective or a tool, just like grazing, just like spraying.
Yeah.
You're going to get different outcomes and you're going to see different succession based on your timing, based on the severity of what you're doing. An example I can think of is this year when we burned some of our production fields, we did some more experimenting with backing fires and creating a fire break. So where you're burning against the wind so that you have a slow fire, but it is usually more sustained.
Yeah.
If you light a fire with the wind, it carries faster and it burns faster.
It's a big show.
Yeah, and it does burn really hot in some cases if you have the material, but it's not sustained.
And you're not removing that residue at the ground level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of little nuance.
Yeah. One of the reasons that we talked about Keith Horn's prairie, one of the reasons I think his you could probably burn it really any time and you're still going to have a great prairie
Something's going to be there.
is because his prairie plants have been there for millennia. I mean,
They're monstrous.
I'm not saying the individual plants are that old, but I mean the prairie has been established so long that the plants that are there, they're not new seedlings,
Right.
And so if you burn lead plant in April, that's fine for him because the root system is literally 12 feet deep. You know what I mean?
And it's like an oak sapling. It's
Right.
pretty
It's
woody.
it's gonna come back, and whereas if you got a 3-year-old prairie and you burn your lead plant sprout that's finally showing up, which is notoriously hard for lead plant to get by seed or by direct seeding. Then you're going to set those young forbs back and maybe open the door for grass dominance. So I think to just play right along with what Riley's saying, there's a million little details. It's not just as simple. We as humans, we love to categorize things into burn in the fall for forbs, you burn in the spring for grass, and
What issues are you
there's
having?
truth to that.
What issues are you having? But I want to break it into. Well, we actually don't know that much about summer burning, so I'm going to leave that one out. But fall burning, early spring burning, and late spring burning, and I'll do fall. Judd, you do early spring, and Kent, you do late spring. Let's just go through pros and cons because each of them have several pros and each of them have several cons. So depending on what you're dealing with in your prairie, these are going to be helpful. So fall burning is that is the wildflower producer. right? That's the one that the most is going to help the wildflowers from anecdotal from dozens of people that I've talked to about it. Now, obviously, there's huge cons. You got to wait. You got to make sure that the corn's up and out of the ground around you. You got to make sure there's not a lot of timber. You're a lot more at risk at a fire getting out of hand in the fall because there's a lot more dead thatch sitting all around on the ground, all around your property. But it will help the forbs, and it will actually, from what I've been told, we haven't done a fall burning here yet. We're hoping to do one this fall. What I've been told is that it sets back your grasses a little bit, allows the forbs to come in. Now, remember that conversation with Lance Rohrda I was talking about we had earlier? He said he burned in the fall, and the flowers were amazing. The grasses are a little set back, and there are more weeds in there. There are more annual weeds showed up than any other year of his prairie, which I think is really fascinating. So the biggest cons on a fall burning, in my opinion, besides setting back the grasses, is the logistics. It's just hard. It's hard to get done. It's hard to do it safely. There's not as much green around for protection.
There's a lot of fields of standing ethanol around that are dry.
Yeah, or even if they're not standing, we saw a bean field catch fire the other day that it had gone through all winter. A lot of it had biodegraded, but it was still enough that it took off in that little bean field, let alone a cornfield or something like that. So logistically, it can be hard. It could really help your forbs, and it could hurt your hunting season. If you're wanting it to be your hunting season.
I don't know about all that. Depending on what you're hunting.
That's fair.
Those critters love disturbance. Turkey, that'll bring turkeys.
Yeah.
That's true.
You couldn't call turkeys better than a fire.
And if you get a little green sprout up, from some of those forbs, I bet the deer will be here.
Here comes the deer.
That's true. That's true. All right, Judd. So what are you thinking? Early spring burning.
Early spring, the one that almost everybody does, that first nice day in the end of February, beginning of March, and you see all that smoke on the horizon.
Yeah.
So what that's doing, that's removing all the residue off of the field. If people are doing it right, doing a backing fire, not just throwing a Kleenex at it and walking away, that happens out
Going
there.
to town.
Come
Let's
back,
go get
check on it at
lunch.
dinner time. I've walked up on some deputies watching a smoking field, and were curious about who owned it. So
Luke Fritch had to help put out a fire that someone lit it and went to town.
oh god,
They just left.
Yeah, they just left. Well, we got it on fire. We'll come back.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
that's wild. But that kind of burning, that's going to give the biggest bump to your grasses. You're going to to a point where you get a little bit of suppression of your forbs because it's going to allow them to come on so much stronger.
And not just your native grasses.
Not just native grasses either.
Giving
Yeah.
a
So
huge bump to your cool season.
your
grasses.
cool season grasses are going to come up as Kent's about to tell you later than that. So opening up the ground, opening that all up to sunlight, to moisture, the seed bank that's there is going to cause a real problem. Am I missing anything?
Well, if you don't have a cool
blackened-
season problem,
The blackened. Well, there's enough cool season seed stock around, whether it's been laying dormant, been suppressed by that prairie for a while, or just birds dropping it,
blow
wind
in there,
dropping
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
but I would say, like, if you have a 12-year prairie, very little cool season, if you burn every year at the end of February, you're going to start having a cool season problem. But if 1 out of 3 burns you do,
right,
and
fair enough. But I'd say the one thing I'd add there is the blackening of the earth at that time going into the growing season is an advantage, right? Because it is soaking up so much heat from the sun. So I think an underrated factor of planting and not just planting prairies, but managing them or crops is soil temps, right?
Oh, yeah.
Germination depends on a certain range of soil temperatures. Like when we were talking about oats earlier, if you plant late enough, I don't know what the range is for oats. I just know that they can germinate in low soil temps, but I don't know what their maximum is. But usually a lot of species have a very wide range, and that top number is pretty dang warm. And so the key more so is managing that bottom number, the low end of the range. And what is the lowest temperature soil temp that these seeds will start to germinate? And when you blacken the earth, you are immediately raising the soil temps for that specific location compared to the acres next to it that aren't burned.
Potentially by tens of degrees.
Right, exactly. And so those cool season grasses or other cool season plants that you don't want, think of Canada Thistle, field bindweed, they can start going, pretty early in the process, and now you've just opened yourself up to a bigger management problem. Yep. And fire's off the table now, because you really can only have a good fire once a year. And sometimes if it's a young enough planting or just a thin enough stand, it might take 2-3 years before you got enough fuel left to use fire as a tool again.
Well, and Dad always said don't burn until at least year 3, but he would wait till year 4. Year 1 is the year that you plant. That's what we consider here. Year 1's the year you plant. So don't burn till at least year 3 or maybe year 4. Chad Gravy says no. He said that he'd burn year 2. He'd be willing to do that. So, yeah. But Kent, what are you thinking about late spring?
Late spring, I would just be using that to manage cool season grass invasion, and I would only burn unless you had some like really nuanced other purpose, like I want to plant something here after I burn. I would look at that as what my objective I'm trying to achieve here is managing cool season grass pressure. And Brome kills prairies, it does, but it's pretty easily corrected. That problem is pretty easily dealt with as long as you have the seed bank there for the natives, or the existing root systems there for the natives to then take the opportunity of the open door of removing that cool season pressure with that late fire. And I wouldn't do that. We've said countless times on here, burn into May to do that. But I would just say this: you're cooking eggs when you do that. If you're, I've just seen it enough. You start burning into May and you are cooking eggs, and
literally,
and you will see a lot of nests that have to be abandoned because you got a bunch of hard-boiled eggs in them. And I have not tested to see how they taste, but I've seen many. I think one year Riley and I saw a nest that had over 15 eggs in it.
Yeah, I think it was a turkey nest or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it was sad to see. And it's like, man, I don't know that I helped the conservation effort today by doing this. And even if you don't cook nests, it's a time when the birds are in great need of cover for nesting, and sometimes the weather just dictates it though too, right? So if you have to burn into early May, just try and be as early in May as possible. But late April, you're gonna achieve pretty much what you would achieve by burning in May anyway. So I would just view it as a time to keep Brome and Kentucky Blue in check by burning that time of year.
And again, on that, perfect is the enemy of good. Late season burning brings that phrase out of me more than anything, because no management in that regard is eventually going to reduce diversity, and the prairie is just going to drown itself.
And there won't be a nest to burn.
Yeah. Yep.
And I should say that Hamilton Native Outpost, they recommend, if CRP has rules, but if you're just like have a prairie, they say introduce burning randomly, like plan in the randomness. They also talk about that with grazing, but
I don't know much about summer burning. Riley and I went to a field day at Grinnell College. They have an incredible prairie. I can't remember the name of the prairie.
It's the I think it's called like the Grinnell College, like CERA or something like that.
Yeah, it's a research prairie basically.
Yeah,
the students.
A lot of that seed's ours.
They have a great prairie. I don't know how you'd say it, prairie conservationist, ecologist track at that college, where a lot of people who are in the Iowa prairie industry have come through. In fact, I believe Laura Jackson, the director of the UNI Tallgrass Prairie Center, was a student there. But they showed us some summer burning plots, and I wish I'd been paying closer attention because she talked about some of the things they'd been learning. But what I would suspect the advantage to a summer burn would be not only obviously maybe setting back some warm season grasses a little bit. But it's going to be a very patchy burn, right? Because you're burning green. And I think it was Ray Gariff who told us a summer burn just a lot of smoke and, steam basically from all the water evaporating in the plant tissue, those green plants. So my guess is you're maybe keeping a grass in check, and you could maybe do that. You're obviously still going to get rid of thatch if you got thatch build up there. And as a hunter, you might still be able to take advantage because after fawning season, those chicks have all hatched and they're able to do some evasion now at this point. And yet you'll still have a lot of unburned prairie for habitat for hunting later that fall. So that would that's me speculating as to what could be happening.
I've got some anecdotal evidence that it does induce a little bit of a panic response in some asters and things like that. Just from a planting that's near me. I'm planting super heavy on silphiums and liatris, and then I came up. I actually thought they sprayed it in the middle of the summer, but it had been burned and then everything browned down. But then as I was walking around out there was all kinds of asters that weren't reaching their full height, but were coming up and saying, hey, I got to set seed before it gets cold. And so there's a lot of flowers deep down.
That's very interesting. That's great observation.
Again, there's no silver bullet. There's no perfect science. You got cons in every way that you want to burn, and don't burn every year the exact same week.
Yeah, do that.
Add some randomness. You'll start selecting if you do that.
And it's different for what we do here at Hawks. We should always point that out.
Yeah.
When we burn our grass fields, they are a grass production field.
Yes.
They function similar to prairies, of course, and they're way better than most habitat around here. But it's not the same as a diverse prairie.
Absolutely. Right. Yep. All right. Will native plants spread and fill in over time? I'll take a quick stab. Yes, but if you say that spot will fill in, you need to manage that spot. Because if you didn't get seed on top of that spot, then will it fill in over years? Yeah, there's prairie around. Prairie seed spreads. Every single species of prairie has a method of spreading. Most of them have several methods of spreading. They will get there, but that means you need to manage that spot that we plan on letting fill in, whether it means you need to make sure that the weeds just aren't getting absolutely crazy, that brome isn't encroaching from the other side. You're not going to be able to burn it. You won't have the prairie thatch on there to get a good burn. And so, yes, it will. You can do that with small spots. If you have a spot in your yard, I would not do that. I would make sure you get seed on every single spot.
There's so much competition in a yard.
Yeah.
When we plant in a field, I'll let you know right now, you got a bunch of trees hanging over. We go around those trees. So if you have a giant tree with big branches sticking out, our tractor goes around those. We don't drag our tractor through those. Nope. And will it fill in? Yes.
I now go around reed canary grass as well.
Yeah. And so,
in the words of Carol, you see reed canary grass, get out of there.
Kent gave me a really good piece of equipment right before he put me in a really nice tractor the other day that you probably need to share.
Wait. That when I told you that?
What Carol told you about protecting the tractor and why you should do that.
Yeah, he's like, if you're planting old, someone's old CRP field or something, they have to do a re-up or something. And he's like, don't risk your life and the equipment, making sure you get every square inch planted when you come around some sketchy washouts or something. Those people, nobody ever goes there. They're not gonna inspect to make sure you don't risk life and limb and equipment over that. So yeah, just go around those hazards.
You remember that
and prairie will fill in over time. Remember, go back to the prehistoric prairie episode when we asked Dr. Russ Benedict, where did prairie seed stock come from? Oh, Virginia. And so I mean, it migrates, it fills in across continents even.
Yes, and so absolutely will prairie fill in. Just like, think about it percentage-wise. For a yard, a small area could be 5% of it. That's a lot. The outskirts of an edge of a field, that might be less than 1%. It's not as big of a deal. But in order for prairie to effectively get there and not have all that competition, you'd have to manage it. So just keep that. Don't plant in strips and leave 20-foot strips between where you're planting and be like, it's cheaper, it'll fill in.
Yeah, do not do that.
We've dealt with those fields. In fact, Judd, today, Today, Judd is going back to replant something that another company planted because that's kind of what their motto was. We'll just plant this in strips and it'll fill in. Well, not good. Actually, the strips are so bad you can see them from Google Maps.
From space.
Oh, it's on. I think it's on X. I think you can see it on X. I just looked at Google the other day. It's not on Google. It was on X, but it is extremely clear. The company must have been mistaken and thought that our drop seeder had some sort of a broadcast element to it.
Yeah, this is crazy.
It goes 10 feet on
Wait,
either
doesn't
side.
have the side seed cannons on it?
Seed cannon. Pending.
There is one thing probably should mention. I get this question sometimes. I'm sure you guys do too. Is when it comes to filling in, your prairie will evolve. There are gonna be like, I'll have a question like, oh, all I see is like this yellow flower, like black-eyed Susan. Where's the rest of my flowers? Like, well, it's not necessarily that that was the only flower that was planted. It's that season.
Yep.
Year 1, you might see this. Year 2, you might see that. Year 3 and year 4. And these plants are going to form communities based on the site itself. If it's dry, if it's sandy, you get a wet spot. So don't see the success of one forb and go, oh, but I bought 30.
Right.
Where's the rest? It's
And
succession.
then here's the other thing about that is if you buy a mix that has a ton of species in it and you put it over a lot of acreage, you're not going to see all those species over the entirety of the planting. It's going to create different isolated little pockets where a lot of things come together. And that's great. That's exactly what you want. You don't want it to look like you put this into Excel and asked it to lay out, how many seeds per square foot and give you a color-coded dot for how it's going to look. That's not how it's going to shake out.
And then the year after you burn, it'll have a specific look, and then 2 years after you burn, it'll have a different look. And so actually, I get a lot of grief from NRCS agents because I like to put just a few cheap, easy to get wetland species in there, like seed box or monkey flower. And the reason is because we can't make a new mix for every single place that we're going. Right. And a big chunk of those places are going to have
wet edges.
Wet edges. Yeah. And so what's going to show up there? I want something that actually makes sense to be there and it can start to take over in that wetland spot. Blue vervain is another one. Just like things that like the wet. And so, it will fill in. Okay. Number 11. What do you do about Reed's canary grass? The very first time I asked this question on the podcast was our first interview with Skip Sly. And he's like, oh, I know how to handle Reed canary grass. You nuke the heck out of it. And he listed, well, first you spray it with glyphosate, and then you can spray it with this, and then later you can spray it with this. And I was like, okay, well, that's one way to deal with it. Laura Walter, who is the kindest lady I've ever met, said she only hates one thing in this world, and it is Reed canary. There is a reason people hate it. Anybody want to take a stab at getting rid of it?
First of all, Kent, why do you avoid it when you see it?
Because it grows in wet areas, and I sank a tractor in some Reed canary.
45 minutes from our farm.
I wasn't trying to draw that part out of you, but it illustrates the point nicely.
See Reed canary grass, get out of there.
Dude, there's some things seared in your brain from like kindergarten and 8th grade, and like that's one for you.
Well, I can't tell you now. I still do dumb things like wrap drip lines around a rotary motor, but I can't tell you how often I see people do something dumb that just say, oh, Carol would just chew you up for even thinking that was going to work. And I'm very thankful that I was I guess I could almost say raised in that way, but that I learned under that. It was he taught me a lot of good stuff. But for Reed canary grass, you need to go into that battle with the right context of your situation or the right understanding of what's realistic. Right? You need to have realistic expectations. And one of the best things, Kevin Griggs says this, I think, Judd, you were the one who actually taught me this years ago. I don't know if you remember this. You sent me a reel where a guy was explaining, this botanist was explaining that Reed canary grass, there's native Reed canary grass to North America, including Iowa, and there's exotic Reed canary grass. think from Asia, if I remember correctly. And that was brought over to North America, and it quickly hybridized with our native. And so, and he said, you really cannot tell the difference between the two. The even if you had them isolated, right? The Eurasian variety and the North American variety species, and you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference. And so that helped me almost make this deal in my brain, right? When I see Brome in a prairie, it's got to go, right? But reed canary is like, in places where you don't want to drive a tractor, reed canary grass was probably part of what was there. Now, were there probably way more sedges also in there competing with it? Were there also way more native reeds, native I'm missing an obvious one here.
Rushes.
That's the one. Thank you. Were there, what we hear all the time in writings from the 19th century, cane breaks in there? Yes.
Was there wildlife stirring it all up?
Yeah. Were there bison grazing it down? Were there things holding it in check? Yes. So it's not the exact same. I understand that. However, don't fight a losing battle unless you absolutely have to, right? And so if you have upland areas that have reed canary, which exist, right? Yeah, that makes sense. Get rid of them. And it's a lot easier to do so because you don't have the water problem to deal with.
Yeah.
Yep. You can't, there are very few herbicides that you are allowed by law to apply to standing water.
Yep.
In fact, I can't even name any off the top of my head. I think there were some glyphosates that were labeled aquatic herbicides that were allowed by the EPA to be used in that manner. So chemical, a lot of times in a reed canary area that's in a wet area, you either have to wait for a very dry year to be able to get in there and apply it, or it's off the table, right?
Are you allowed to wipe on chemicals over standing water?
Maybe, but how are you getting in there? You're gonna sink your tractor.
Yeah.
And so
Get a submersible.
a hovercraft.
Yeah.
Man, can you imagine that? We need some hovercrafts around here. We would not be coming into lunch. We would all just be out there doing like drifting in
the only thing I could imagine you could do with a wiper is if you had like a wide enough bar, like a 30-foot bar or something like that, and you could like go from the outside,
and then you're going to catch a mulberry tree and snap
I have a theory about reed canary on why it's so prolific in Iowa right now. Is you know how
all the nitrogen washes down to the wetland areas and grass
where the seeds are floating?
You know how like it has insane biomass and insane seed production? I think it is very prolific at uptaking nitrogen.
Sure.
I think it is, and because of that, it can
That's
just
a
because
point.
we have so much nitrogen in our water right now, it's don't mind if I do.
Yeah, it might actually be providing a real conservation service to us.
So you can get. I've heard people say you can get rid of it if you can spray, and it's not in standing water, which huge percent of the time it is. You can spray it over and over again.
It's rhizomous.
Yeah.
So tillage isn't necessarily going to help you.
It's going to help the grass.
The Chad Gravy gave a good point that if you get a really good timed burn, and then you can get animals in there after the burn, but you'd have to do that a couple years in a row. Whatever you do for reed canary, I mean, it's like Big Bluestem. Big Bluestem, you're not going to spray it with Roundup once or twice and get rid of it, dude. You have to bean it for like 5 years and spray Roundup 3 times a year, and and even then you got to plant a forb on it afterwards, so you can still spray the seedlings with clethodim. So it is really intense. Whatever you have to do many rounds of it. If you absolutely have to get rid of it, I mean, the spraying would be good, rotating glyphosate and clethodim on it, and then wherever you have reed canary and you say I'm going to get rid of this, and let's say you do through burning and grazing regimen or spraying, you need to plan on replanting. Don't be like, then the other stuff will come back.
One thing I would add with the clethodim though is clethodim does have residual holdover, and so I would work that early into your spraying regimen.
Yeah.
Kent, who gave the master class recently on the podcast talking about reed canary grass with the natural history and saying that unless you could control the entire watershed, it's basically
that was Kevin Griggs. Yeah, he talked about the fact when we have like a big 6-inch rain, those creek bottoms all flood out of their banks, and so you may have done your 300 yards of Iowa coastline, meticulous reed canary removal, but Dirty Dan up the creek, who's never Dirty Dan, who's never ever considered removing any reed canary from his place. If it's already gone to seed, and you get that heavy rain, it just brings all of his seed stock and plants it right into your CRP.
Yep.
And so you kind of have to just learn to live with it, in my opinion.
Don't be upset if you fail. It happens to all of us.
Yeah.
In fact, if you hate it because it has ruined all your hunting habitat value, maybe you just need to have less corn and extend your prairie out from the reed canary.
Nicholas, what did we drive across the other day? Was that you said it was the delta of the Des Moines River? Is that what that was? And those islands that had formed?
The Red Rock.
Red Rock.
Red Rock Lake Reservoir. It's Iowa's largest lake, but it's technically a reservoir.
Was there reed canary there before the trees started coming up? I know you probably didn't get a close enough look at it, but do you suppose it could have been?
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I'm sure there. That rings a
it
bell.
was the Des Moines River before it was the Red Rock Reservoir, so
Yeah.
I'm sure there was a heck of a lot of reed canary.
Well, because you were saying it was just bare and wide open for a long time, and then the last.
Okay, yeah. So not the 1,000 or not the mile long bridge, but the other shorter bridge on 14 where you guys cross, and there's like kind of a delta there. I remember growing up and those trees not being nearly the size they are. Like it was mostly water in there.
Well,
and that's just how much erosion has come in and created these islands.
Yeah, so that you were born after then. Okay. Well, but you were still born in. I guess how old were you when you moved to this area?
1999.
That's when you kind of remember.
No, I'm thinking really early 2000s.
Well, I mean, the flood of '93 was unbelievable on the Des Moines
I've
River.
seen the mark,
the high water marks.
Yeah.
You just can't fathom it. You like look at that and you're like, it was that high. You know? But that means all these houses that are here would have been like under 10 feet under that. You know what I mean? It's like
it was such a big deal. We got a shout out in the movie Bug's Life.
Oh, really?
At the beginning, this is worse than the stick of 93. And they were referencing Iowa's flood.
That's funny.
It was like a national thing. Yeah.
But my guess is that area was still, being a decade later, was still recovering from such a
scoured out.
Yeah, that.
Oh, okay. But you're right. That makes sense.
Early enough.
So I was telling Judd, I was like, this wasn't like. This was not filled with this tree foliage like it is now when I was a kid. I don't know why this delta, and they're all like young little trees, but there's like these islands that are being made. And anyway, we don't have to get into that.
Sorry, stuck in my head.
Let's move on to number 12, Canada Thistle. How do we get more Canada Thistle on the ground? A lot of people asking that.
Well, it produces a lot of seed, and those, just like dandelions, those seeds are. They're wind transfer.
They're a little lighter than dandelion seeds.
Yeah, they're tiny and very light and fluffy. So, and they grow not only by seed but on a rhizome. So they form these large patches, and
they're usually an indication of compaction. That's usually why they're there, because nothing else is going to grow. So they do serve a purpose.
Those roots kind of bust up the soil a little bit.
Yeah, they shoot a big old taproot down.
And they are Roundup resistant. I would even say immune. They are 2,4-D resistant, although 2,4-D will defoliate them, kind of, cause them to shrivel and wilt.
Yeah.
But like Riley said, it does not kill that deep taproot.
No.
We have managed them historically here at Hoxie with defoliant.
Some of the most toxic chemicals that humans make and are allowed to spread.
And we do not use them anymore.
No, we do not like that stuff.
And I would liken the use of those products as mowing them off. It took care of what was above the surface, and maybe some like real young, like new young of the year plants, little sprouts, probably killed them. But it did not by any means alleviate the problem.
Yeah.
And it was only a control measure like mowing is.
And just to be totally transparent, like when we clean seed and send it in for a test, there occasionally we get some noxious weeds that pop in, like foxtail or some Pennsylvania smartweed, which is technically native, and a grandstanding prairie is almost never an issue.
You really don't have to worry about getting Canada Thistle in your seed test because our seed clean we use.
That's what I'm saying. That one never comes in our noxious weed. Like I see all our seed tests, it does not flow through.
I've never seen. I've looked at hundreds of seed tests from here, and I've never seen Canada Thistle.
The reason for that is we do our best to control it, but also we use fanning mills to clean, and the fan part, like Judd was saying, they're lighter than dandelions. They're tiny little seeds that they'll blow right out of the seed cleaner. So it's not really a concern for that. It's just a concern that it does kind of choke out areas of your prairie, and there isn't a farm in Iowa that doesn't have some Canada Thistle, and if you don't have it, stay humble because it's going to be there soon. It moves around the landscape and it takes a stronghold. So really it is one of those things where if you were going to try and remove it without using a herbicide,
that's very tough.
I think you could maybe try to dig at the tap roots.
Just constant repeated pressure.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, a patch of Canada Thistle is going to have hundreds of individual plants, and so it just really I can't imagine that being an even feasible.
So the tissues store a tremendous amount of energy. So in my previous career, I managed a 4-acre woodlot, and there were years when up to a third of that was probably a solid stand of Canada Thistle that you couldn't do anything but drive a machine through. And so I resolved that I was going to try to figure out how to get rid of that. And the best thing, and this did work, after 3 years, I completely eliminated the Canada Thistle. I would go through and just, in the evening, if it was slow, I would walk through it there with a pair of hand clippers and cut them right underneath the buds before they even started to flower. And that's the important part, because if you knock those off lower, I just mentioned that there's a tremendous amount of energy in the vascular tissues of that plant. It can lay on the ground and set seed from a bud. So you want to take all that away from it by clipping those flowers off. And I'm talking about small projects. This is an elbow grease thing. Clip those off, and then you can go through and either mow it or down at the ground level, or just knock it off so you can get a clear shot at the stem and apply some triclopyr directly like you were going to do cut stump, like we're probably about ready to talk about. And then that will translocate down into that taproot, kill it. And after a fairly short period of time, now this 4 acres was in the middle of thousands of acres of row crop, so there wasn't a lot of intrusion from the outside, but it's to this day is completely gone.
Yeah, that's a good success story. I would recommend using Milestone.
It translocates much faster, and then it takes a little bit to take action.
And it's not as like triclopyr you don't want to get that on you. Like that's it's got,
you don't want to get anything on you.
Yeah, it's got some it's a little bit nastier for just human handling.
Yep.
Milestone's pretty you read the label on it and it's not bad.
Drinkable.
And it works well on Canadians. And then you could also look at a product called Duracor. The problem with Duracor is it kills everything, kind of like triclopyr, and it can have a long holdover in that area. And so those are some considerations though as well to when you look at your problem.
There's a reason the weeds we're talking about are on this list. It's because there's not an easy solution. There's not a quick solution. There's not a guaranteed solution. These are difficult to get rid of.
It's diligence and elbow grease.
And if you're going to do herbicide, it's better to get them early. But that's for anything. Like if you're going to spray off your annual rye cover crop, you're better off spraying it when it's calf high as opposed to chest high.
Yeah.
And
don't follow the label on all those. Don't think that doubling the rate is going to do you any good because by some off chance a segment of that population survives. You just created an insane amount of resistance.
Yeah.
Well, and one other thing to keep in mind when you're talking about managing Canada thistles is you can exacerbate a small problem and make it a big one by like overgrazing or over mowing at the wrong time. If you have a lot of immature plants that are going to become Canadians and you open up that overstory, whether that be letting in a lot of animals, there's been talk about invasive weeds in the regenerative grazing community. And if you do a really targeted grazing in a spot where you've got an unpalatable weed with barbs in it like Canada does, you're
set the table for it.
Yeah, you're opening up the overstory and you're creating a scenario where your Canadians are just going to thrive.
Yeah, you're funneling resources to it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And a note: your native thistles have a silver underside, so be nice to those.
Good to know.
Yeah, they're really cool. They got like a white underside.
Field thistle, right?
Yep.
Seed very valuable. So if you got some field thistle.
Yeah, I've been asked for it before. It's just hard to get a hold of. There's some people that'll hand harvest it, and I don't want to hand harvest it. I won't lie to you. It makes sense why it costs a lot, and I'm happy to pay them when we can find it. At Hoxie Native Seeds, our mission is to provide native seed and education for landowners and land managers that care about their ground. So the education, we're doing that through the podcast and interviewing experts and the stuff we put out through our website. But the native seed that we provide, whether we grew it or we work with other producers that grew it, we are here to provide that for you. It's what keeps the lights on for us, and it's what we love to do. Most of our seeds grown right here on our farm, hoxienativeseeds.com. Oh, and if you need a little help with consultation, not sure what to put on your ground, we would be happy to help you with that as well. Give us a call, hoxienativeseeds.com. All right, Riley, question number 13. What do I do about brushy encroachment?
So for brushy encroachment, I've got an opinion, and it might run a little counter to some other people. I'm a fan of the elbow grease method. Woody encroachment. So the gut reaction when somebody plants a prairie and they're on year, let's say 5, 6, 7, something like that. They start to see these little saplings, whether it be eastern red cedars, whether it be mulberries, willows, whatever, what have you.
Maple,
you
autumn
get
olive.
Yeah, autumn olive. Oh, I hate autumn olive. I could write a book on that. But you see this woody encroachment coming in, and people's gut reaction is, well, I can see it. It's kind of like weeds and mowing. Well, if I take a brush hog out there and I grind it down really close to the ground, it looks good. It's just like mowing your yard with the dandelions. You go out there and you cut them all down, and you look over and you go, wow, I really did something. And then about 3 weeks passed.
Sneaky little bush.
So those bushes, when you mow the top off of them, nature's response is to become a bush. A tree becomes a bush. And so it just shoots suckers, is what they call them, out at the base. So the tree goes, okay, well, I can't grow up and in 3 trunks. I'm no arborist here, but it grows a million suckers, and they point in every direction, and they grow flat and wide, basically. And now you've created this huge problem, because if you're talking about autumn olive and other small trees like that, and woody brush, when you mow them so much, they create suckers. They grow into a shrub-like thing. And if you want to come back in later and cut them with a chainsaw, you have to cut 8 suckers.
What exactly do I cut here?
You try cutting it all, and you're treating it with herbicide, and it's a big mess.
And now it's growing so low you can't hit all of it with a brush hog, and now you're making it even worse when you go back over it.
Personally,
and you make punji sticks when you do that too for your tires.
Personally, if you can, I'm a big fan of those battery-powered loppers that they sell now.
I
And
haven't seen those.
I have some in my truck. I think they're amazing.
they're battery-powered loppers. They're good for anything up to like 1 3/4 usually is what most of the Milwaukee DeWalt brands are. You can cut something like
Jobs is
that,
Milwaukee,
and you
we
can
know.
spot treat with an herbicide. I know we've talked about Tordon. There's a lot of different chemicals out there for spot treating woody brush, but
Oh, so you're talking about going out there, hand cutting,
Oh, yeah.
and
Treating.
applying.
When you first see them. Yep. When you first see them.
because brush hogging is it's a strategy.
It's deferring a problem.
Yeah.
What about goats?
Well, yeah, goats and sheep. I'm talking. I guess what I was more talking about
It's
is
just a far less common practice.
the landowner
use.
that has prairie that has no grazing pressure, that just it sits.
Yeah.
You could also do targeted burns.
Yeah.
Burns help with woody encroachment. But
And I will say this: that is something I noticed. I'm glad you brought that up, Riley. That is something I've noticed in my planting where I deferred the mowing. After we talked with Kelly last year, I have a lot of saplings in my prairie, just from my yard. I think it's literally we have a lot of mulberry trees in our yard, and we pick mulberries and we eat mulberries and things like that. But so do the birds, and the birds like to go land on my prairie and crap out seeds and drop seeds in my prairie, and even in your yard, you're going to get trees.
That's what those berries are designed to do, be moved.
Man. So I know burning helps. It obviously doesn't cure it. Of like if you have a 10, 5 or bigger acre area, you're going to have just numbers wise, you're going to have trees that squeak by and they get big enough to get to the next year where they're at the point where burnings hurt it, but don't kill them.
I think like August, September, October, are the best months for doing this, right?
Starting in July.
Because they're starting to
it's
return nutrients back
before the sap goes back down.
And especially for locusts, too, if you're dealing with locusts.
And so what you can do then is if you burn, you'll eliminate most of them, and then you'll just have several that you can go and treat with elbow grease. But also I know that honeysuckle, autumn olive, Adam Levina. Now this is specifically in woodland areas or edge prairies. He'll go in there. They'll graze them, and those trees or shrubs are prolific for a reason. So then a few weeks later, or a couple months later, they'll shoot suckers back up. Then he'll bring in the goats because that was kind of
it's the last ditch effort.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
And then
It's that
the
panic
goats will
response.
go in and be like, ooh,
Yeah,
they
small
love
green
it.
areas.
It's very
Yeah.
well, and it's very nutrient dense.
Yep.
Browse.
Yeah.
Yep.
One other thing I should mention, though, too, when it comes down to eastern red cedars, is you don't need to treat eastern red cedars with herbicide.
No, they don't store a lot of energy at all.
No. So if you,
I did not know that.
as long as you cut an eastern red cedar below the bottom needle,
That's done.
Interesting.
then
Their
then
roots
they'll
are
die.
super
Yeah.
shallow. Yeah, there's nothing down there.
That's
And
really
then
interesting.
So
if we want to scale up and talk about mechanical removal with machinery, hire a contractor, have them come in, make sure they understand. And this is more like edge. You probably wouldn't want to do this in your prairie because there's a tilling aspect to it. But with a forestry mulching head, there are 2 flat spots on that machine. The bottom one keeps the cutter head above ground. It flush cuts. There's a second flat spot toward the front of that machine that operators hate to use because it puts a tremendous amount of wear on the carbide teeth on that machine. And every 600 hours, those need changed. I think it's about $1,200 to $1,400. It might be even more expensive now to change a full set of those teeth, plus the day it takes to do it. And then you're going to want to have that operator rotate that head down to that second flat spot and get it into the dirt and remove all the root crowns of those plants. If your operator doesn't do that, if he hasn't factored that into the price, he is banking on job security coming back in a couple of years.
That's a huge tip.
So there's that. I want to get on my soapbox about Tordon. I say this to almost everybody. If I pipe up on Native Habitat Managers Facebook group, it's 90% of the times to say this. Tordon.
10%. It's miscanthus.
Oh yeah, they do a pretty good job of keeping that talk down on there. But Tordon belongs in a working fence line, and only in a working fence line. I still am sitting on pins and needles because as a an enthusiastic wannabe land manager over a decade ago, I went in and did hack and squirt on a bunch of elm trees and other low value trees and one of my biggest stands of mature oaks on our properties. And I'm just watching those trees year by year, hoping that the roots don't reach what I did, because what happens is that herbicide, the Tordon, translocates down into the roots. It kills the roots decompose, and now that chemical, Chase Burns told me this years ago, and my blood ran cold because of the oak trees. Those roots dissolve and decompose, and that chemical's half-life is infinite for our purposes. We're alive, for way shorter than that chemical's in there.
Where did you do it, Ken?
I didn't do that.
It.
I'm just like the horror of that is
It's on every end cap in every farm store. And people say, "Look,
just
squeezy bottle."
And your specific situation with just thinking of those ancient oaks.
I'm hoping their root systems are way down there far enough and not close enough to the surface. It's not. It's been over a decade and everything's okay. So fingers crossed that they're probably going to die of root rot before that happens. Yeah. But now every root system that reaches that spot in the soil is going to be affected. That's why it's so effective in a fence line.
Yeah.
Anything that gets down there and touches it is going to be affected and probably die. So it's so important that people know that. Tordon RTU, the RTU stands for ready to use, pre-diluted, in a handy little squeeze bottle that has the holes, and you can just hose whatever you just cut off with it. It's the worst thing you can do in a wild setting.
Well, also causes colorectal cancer.
Oh yeah, that's big. That's huge.
It's been linked to that. Yeah. I shouldn't say it causes. It's been linked to.
Yeah, heavily the
Heavily
most
linked.
the highest correlation actually
So
out of anything.
And another thing you can do when you're doing this cut stump, make it easy on yourself. Go to the hardware store. Kent, you just bought a daubing applicator. How much did that cost?
It cost me $72 from A.M. Leonard.
$72. So what you can do is go to the hardware store, buy you a T fitting for 3/4 inch PVC.
Yep.
Get you a stick of 3/4 inch PVC. Affix that to it however you want. Heat it up, glue it, whatever. It's cheap enough you can do it, whatever. You might not even need to put glue on it. Get yourself a kitchen sponge and a couple of zip ties, and then just zip tie that sponge to the T fitting. It'll hold it nice and flat.
And get a little ball valve too.
See this method, you're not even gonna fill that PVC with any herbicide. So, and then what I go and do is I get a spray bottle. And I learned this from people that work for Illinois Department of Natural
You're talking
Resources.
for hack and squirt.
For hack and squirt, yeah. So this is for like direct application. You're not going to worry about overspray with some of the chemicals that are most effective here, because you don't want that bare spot on the ground around there. Even though you're going to get something from translocation in the short term, it's not going to stay in the soil. So you're just going to take that spray bottle, stick it right into the sponge, and apply your herbicide so that you don't have any drip, and cut and apply just immediately. You have about a half an hour to get that stuff on the vascular tissue of whatever you just cut before the plant starts to weep and self-seal. So cut, apply, cut, apply, cut, apply. It works great in pairs. It can be done with one person. I've done it in my timber. I'm seeing all kinds of cool stuff come back where I've killed honeysuckle. So.
Awesome. Well, 3 more. What do we do about brome in our prairie?
Well, I kind of answered that earlier. To me, just it's a burn timing thing, and you might have to do it a few years, and you might have to do some. If the prairie is thin enough, and there's no longer the seed stock there, and usually the case for that's going to be someone planted a prairie, they did not get a good enough kill before they or maybe they only did one application before they planted it, and it's been years, and so the seeding that was done, those seeds aren't there anymore. They rotted, they got eaten, they blew away, whatever. And just like brush piles, nature abhors a vacuum, right? Abhors an empty brush pile. You may have to go in and do a little interseeding with some new stuff after you've been working on removing that brome. Or in herbicide, of course, works too.
Yeah.
I have noticed though that brome, it has held up. It's not, I wouldn't say it's resistant to gly, but I've seen it hold up to gly a little bit. And I would expect it to respond similarly to clethodim, because clethodim,
that's what I wonder.
it's not a real hard hitter.
Could you spray it with clethodim where it would set it back enough that big blue stem that's there could
If
come
you
in.
went at the right time of year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or if you have if it's just starting to take over, it hasn't been there for years.
Because it's going to weaken the big blue as well. And it won't kill the big blue.
No.
Most
Not by a
likely.
long shot.
No, and another thing you can do is remember those early spring burnings we had talked about? You can actually burn early spring. That will help the
Judd's
Brome.
timeline. Yeah, late February.
And then that's up really early, way before any big blue
'Cause of the
Indian,
blackened soil.
you can spray it. Now, if you have a really mature prairie and you're getting spring ephemerals, do not do
No.
that.
Nope.
No.
It is not. There's sometimes
That's actually sinful to do.
Perfect as the enemy of good. Perfect as the enemy of good.
now. If you have a bunch of black-eyed Susan and you need to spray to keep it a healthy prairie, I understand. We don't do that for things like wild geranium. We don't. We figure
Yeah.
out another way. So that mostly covers Brome.
That would be.
I just did another little experiment. I ran sheep in my ditch on the
yeah.
brome that's in the ditch. I grazed it down lower than is recommended for sustainable grazing because I don't like it. And then what I did is I wanted to do a little test. And I took my lawnmower, put it on the lowest setting, and ran over and scalped it. It is not doing well. So
to
pressure, a
know.
little bit of pressure.
Interesting.
I would say also on the mowing side of it, pay attention to what's going on. If it like right now, brome is pollinating, and now is a great time if you're going to try and herd it with a mowing. Now is a good time when plants are in the reproductive phase of their their annual life cycle. That's when they are taking the maximum amount of energy away from the root system and putting it out on those external tissues to produce a flower, to produce seed. And if you injure it, then it has less reserve to come back. So you can right now.
Right
is the
now,
best
you mean
time.
very early June, end of May.
Well, this is airing tomorrow, right?
But it'll be kind
that's
of an
true. This
evergreen.
back
So,
end. So this is
very
this is
early.
June 2nd when we're talking.
Yeah. Awesome. What do I do about the big bluestem that's taken over or switchgrass that's taken over, and I really don't have many flowers left?
You burned the same time of year every year, and now you have this problem.
You could try a fall burn. I think grazing can play a role in this. Grazing probably should have played a role in it before you've gotten to this point. I would say there's a great video by Conservation Blueprint. Our buddy Pete Berthelsen out there shows how he uses clethodim to help dig himself out of this problem. If he's managing a prairie that's got this problem, he'll do a fairly light application. So in other words, you're just harming. I don't know. Maybe he goes pretty hot with it. I don't know. I can't remember.
But even at a heavy rate, you'd be hard pressed to convince me one round of clethodim is going to kill out. Big bluestem.
And he's just setting it back and allowing those flowers to express themselves more as the canopy is opened for them, and that seems to work. But I would say this too, though, even though it is a grass selected herbicide. As Carol would say, any kind of thing, if you get it too heavy on plant life, it'll damage it. So
and I think if our ideal, is end of May through the end of June, having cows on it, they will. Riley, they'll hammer that big blue.
Well, it depends. It's going to depend A, on your timing, and B, on your animal. If you have a problem with switch, you want to be in there earlier than big bluestem. And the animal you're using, if you're using cattle, you're going to have less grazing on your forbs. If you graze really hard with sheep with the idea you're going to increase your pollinators, I think Judd maybe can speak to this with a little bit more authority, but in my mind, you're setting yourself up for failure because sheep eat a lot of things.
Yeah.
Cattle will focus more on the grass component, but sheep, you're going to get unintended damage if you overgraze where there's grass and forbs.
Yeah, sheep are kind of the middle ground in between that. So people think cattle grass only. Goats are preferential browsers.
Yeah.
They'll go off after broadleaves almost exclusively and resort to grass if they're starving. But sheep, depending on the breed, there's so many different breeds of sheep. Some of them are just like cattle. Some of them are a lot closer to goats. It just takes a little bit of research to figure that out.
Man, all right. And finally, number 16, can I interseed flowers back into my prairie grassland? Actually, I just got stopped at a farmer's market.
Wait, shouldn't that just say, will my flowers that I interseeded into my prairie show up?
Yeah.
You can do anything.
Yeah, that's real. We've talked about this before on the podcast. Judd and I are actually working on an interseeding mix. And here's our thought process on it. Very hard to get new seedling forbs to show up in a grassland. We recommend a fall burning and then a fall planting of those flowers. And it probably wouldn't hurt to have a mowing regimen as if it was a new planting the whole next summer. But no guarantees, even doing it that meticulously. So what we do is in interseeding mixes, we add very cheap forbs that we can put a lot of seeds that are very competitive. Yeah. Think Black-Eyed Susan, Foxglove Penstemon, Wild Bergamot, Gray-headed Coneflower. Yep.
Common milkweed.
Yeah, Maximilia's sunflower.
Partridge pea, maybe?
Sawtooth sunflower.
I get nervous about sawtooth sunflower.
That stuff show up anywhere.
Man. You wouldn't believe how many.
I saw one on the moon once.
Yeah, in a photo in the background. No, that was in California at a photo shoot, Ken. That landing never happened. No.
Sorry. We're doing this?
Just some common milkweed and some sawtooth sunflower growing at the base of the flagpole.
Yeah, and you can make these happen. It takes extra steps. It's harder to do. You got to seed kind of heavy. It's expensive, and then there's still no guarantee. So I tell people it's worth the risk. It's worth trying, but I think we should take a chunk of our old Big Bluestem field, just like a corner of it, see if we can get flowers to show up. That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
But all right, it's been a long time. It's been 2 hours. Anybody have anything else they want to make sure they add on that?
I was just going to say on the interseeding, if you are in a hurry to get prairie and you want you think, well, the grass is the cheaper part. I can get the grass and then I can add the flowers later.
Oh,
don't.
If anything, do it the other way around.
Yeah.
If you're going to do one than the other.
The flowers are the expensive part. If I was going to, say, plan a $5,000 project and I would save for another 2 years and get the money and do it all together.
Yeah.
Cutting corners in the natural world generally leads to disastrous results.
We mentioned it several times, but we didn't discuss it specifically in step 2. The use of row crop in prairie sites.
Yeah.
So difference between corn and beans, fellas? Anybody?
Yeah.
Legume, so nitrogen fixer versus nitrogen hogger.
Yeah. And so a lot of people are like, well, there's a lot of trash on the ground with the corn. Totally fine, especially if you're planting in the fall. You plant it right on those suckers. Mm-hmm. Corn pulls up a bunch of the nitrogen, which means your grasses won't be as dominant right away, which means that your legumes and your wildflowers can really shine, particularly the legumes. Partridge pea, purple prairie clover,
Bundleflower.
Illinois bundleflower, round-headed bush clover, white wild indigo. These are plants that we don't actually put a huge seeding rate in to begin with because they're a little expensive per seed, but also the quality of each seed is better. So they're actually going to have a boost. Big fan of having a boost on those species. So you're right. But bean ground or corn ground, either way, is going to have a really, really great prairie establishment because you fixed all of those Brome, reed, Canary issues over years and years of corn and beaning. Now, if you have a pasture and you want to do corn and beans to set it for prairie, you're playing the long game, at least 2 years. Mm-hmm. Don't think 1 year is not going to cut it. Sorry.
I would also advise you plant soybeans that are not only Roundup resistant, but also 2,4-D resistant, so that if you have like a stubborn broadleaf problem, you can work on that. And then I'd use seed that is not coated in insecticide.
Oh yeah, neonicotinoids
simply because you're already doing some ecological damage every time you plant corn and soybeans. You don't need to be doing more.
Because the enemy of good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. I hope you got as much out of this as we did. It was a nice refresher.
Oh, I want to add one more thing in there. One more thing.
Yeah.
A prairie, until we get bison and elk back, a prairie is not a I did all the upfront work. Now I can walk away from it forever. Yeah. It just isn't the case. Now the maintenance drastically drops off once you've done that heavy lifting on the front end, but there's always going to be little spots you got to manage, little trees. Like Riley said, the best way to go in there is the elbow grease and do it the hard way, which is the right way.
Yep.
And you get a patch of brome, get in there, take care of it. Pull it all out by hand. That's the best way. It's not fun, but you got to do it for maybe 30 minutes here and there. Get the whole family together, make it more fun. That's what we did in my prairie last night.
If you have a backyard prairie, what I tell people, after that second year mowing is done, your maintenance is looking like a couple or a few afternoons a year. So it's not nothing. It's a lot less than how much you'd spend mowing. But if you have a larger prairie, obviously there's more maintenance for more acres. I understand that.
Yeah, and something I've noticed is I think we're going through a phenomenon right now where a lot of us are sick of being on our phones as much as we are. I mean, you can just see that in the amount of times I see my friends posting now compared to a few years ago. People are just, they're wanting to be off of the thing. And when you have a project like a little prairie to dote on, you're not on your phone.
Yep.
Yeah, that's totally true.
You'll find that you already got the time to manage it. You don't realize it.
Yep.
If you are looking at this, go to Hoxie Native Seeds /learning-center, I think, and you'll see this podcast. You'll see FAQ place. You'll see a link to our forum where people are asking really niche questions on there. It's awesome. Those niche questions are what we like to see because then we can actually ping some of the experts and get some of those answers. And then we have a native plant database, which is new, over 650 species. It gives a bunch of their details, like what kind of height, what's their bloom period, what kind of soil do they like, all these different things, a little blurb about them. I think, and what state that they're native to. So you can actually click on a state and see all the plants there that are native to it. Not all of them, but it's like 662, so there's a lot of them. And it's useful. Hoxie Native Seeds /Learning Center. Just go to our website. You'll see it. We really, really appreciate you. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you again next time.